On July 3, 2025, a swarm of 21 Iranian suicide drones, including 10 newly upgraded Shahed-238s, penetrated U.S. airspace over Dhafra Air Base, evading detection for 12 critical seconds. That sliver of silence was enough. The first strike came fast. Fuel tank 03B erupted in a fireball, incinerating 2 M1 Abrams and vaporizing more than 1.6 million barrels of jet fuel. Damage estimates surpassed $890 million within minutes. Iran had not just struck hardware, it had pierced the illusion of American invulnerability. This was the boldest UAV assault since the Hormuz crisis, planned with surgical precision, executed with shocking success. For 12 seconds, U.S. defenses went blind, and in that blindness, the battlefield shifted. Less than 48 hours later, the United States prepared its answer. From the decks of the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and the launch tubes of a Virginia-class submarine, Tomahawk missiles and F/A-18E Super Hornets would descend on Iran's Shahed Karimi Air Base, the very heart of its drone warfare program. But beyond the smoke and flames lay a deeper truth. Hidden alliances were shifting, new fronts were opening, and a larger game was unfolding. Can Iran withstand the weight of this firepower? Join me in this fight. At 4:15 a.m. on July 3, 2025, the sky above Dhafra Air Base in the United Arab Emirates erupted, not with sirens, but with fire. What should have been another quiet desert night turned into a sudden inferno. Iran's drones had found their mark, and their target was not merely a military garrison, but something far more economically vital. A U.S.-protected strategic fuel storage complex holding over 1.6 million barrels of refined JP-8 jet fuel. Of the 21 inbound UAVs, 10 were newly upgraded Shahed-238s, equipped with AI-driven evasion software and short-term radar stealth coding. They could vanish from U.S. tracking systems for 12 seconds, just long enough to slip past the base's layered defenses. Iranian planners chose their moment with surgical precision. Minimal troop rotations, radar sensitivity distorted by desert heat, and fuel tankers exposed outside under night operations. It was a recipe for catastrophe. At 4:18 a.m., disaster struck. One Shahed-238 slammed into Tank 03B, a massive 312,000-barrel storage unit. The impact ignited a towering fireball that rose more than 300 feet into the air, visible for miles across the desert. Within seconds, sympathetic detonations engulfed nearby armored fuel trucks. The overpressure wave disabled 2 M1A2 Abrams idling just 80 yards away, their electronics fried and hulls scorched. The temperature at the fire's core reached nearly 10,000 degrees, hot enough to melt the steel frames of surrounding support structures. Shock waves rippled across command tents, rattling every soldier awake. Fire suppression units scrambled, but it would take more than 3 hours to contain the blaze. By then, the damage was done. Over $890 million in fuel and infrastructure destroyed, and 5 U.S. personnel injured, including 2 airmen with second-degree burns. For the Pentagon, it wasn't just a physical loss. It was a psychological blow. The world's most advanced military had been caught off guard. By 6 a.m., DEFCON 3 was declared for all CENTCOM forces operating in the region. The order rippled across every base and battleship in the Middle East. Within minutes, an emergency video call connected the Secretary of Defense, the CENTCOM commander, and the National Security Council. Drone and satellite footage left little doubt. The towering fireball, the twisted hulks of M1 Abrams, and the unmistakable signature of Iranian Shahed technology. The evidence was clear, and the shock was deeper than the flames. No warning had been given. No interceptors had been launched. America's defenses had been blinded, even if only for 12 seconds, by an adversary it had long underestimated. This was not a symbolic strike. It was a calculated disruption of fuel logistics, the beating heart of U.S. operations in the Gulf. For Washington, it could only be read one way, not provocation, but an act of war. And behind the scenes, that answer was already forming. Before we dive into America's powerful counterstrike, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below and stand ready. Now let's witness how the United States responded to this bold act of aggression. Just 90 minutes after the strike, U.S. reconnaissance confirmed the origin. Shahed Karimi Air Base in Yazd Province, Iran. A Tier 1 IRGC drone facility, nearly 790 miles from Dhafra, had served as the launch site. By noon, the global impact was visible. Oil prices spiked 7.8% in a single day. NATO issued a rare joint warning, while CENTCOM raised key assets to heightened alert across the Gulf. This wasn't a message in words, one Pentagon official admitted grimly. It was a declaration in fire. The clock was ticking. America would strike back. It was only a matter of when. The decision came at 2 a.m. on July 5, 2025. Deep beneath the Pentagon, inside a sealed command center, Operation Desert Flash was greenlit. There would be no press briefings, no public warnings. The response would be delivered in steel and fire. At 2:30 a.m., the first wave launched from the Arabian Sea. A Virginia-class submarine and the USS Curtis Wilbur, DDG-54, expelled 28 Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missiles into the night. Each carried a 1,000-pound warhead, pre-programmed with precision coordinates for Shahed Karimi Air Base in Iran's Yazd province, the heart of the drone warfare network that had humiliated CENTCOM just 48 hours earlier. Flying low at nearly 550 miles per hour, the missiles skimmed the sea before turning inland, their guidance systems locked tight on hardened targets. Simultaneously, the second wave ignited from the deck of the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, positioned 96 nautical miles off the Strait of Hormuz. 12 FA-18E Super Hornets roared skyward, joined by 4 EA-18G Growlers for electronic warfare support. Within minutes, the strike package was invisible under heavy radar jamming, cutting through Iranian airspace with lethal precision. The first impacts came from the Tomahawks. Shahed Karimi's main radar array disintegrated in a fireball, followed by crippling strikes on 6 fuel bunkers, 3 UAV launch pads, and a command node suspected to house IRGC cyber operations. Secondary detonations ripped through the base as fuel and munitions ignited, painting the desert sky orange. Then came the Hornets. JDAM GBU 32 bombs fell with surgical accuracy, collapsing 2 fortified UAV hangars and annihilating drones before they could be dispersed. Meanwhile, the Growlers fired AGM-88 HARM missiles, tearing into Iran's Khordad 15 air defense batteries, leaving the base blind and defenseless. The coordination was flawless, the effect devastating. IRGC communications went dark. Satellite imagery showed Shahed Karimi engulfed in smoke and flame, its command nodes silent. Initial reports confirmed at least 14 Iranian personnel killed, including 2 senior drone engineers. 70% of the base's operational infrastructure was destroyed. What had taken years to build was gutted in under 17 minutes. The strike sent a message sharper than any speech. The U.S. knows where you launch from, and we can silence it at will. For Washington, this was redemption. For Tehran, it was a staggering loss. The very heart of its UAV program reduced to rubble, its prestige burned into ash. Aboard the Eisenhower, the final transmission came calm, almost clinical. Objective neutralized, returning to carrier, 0 casualties. And with that, America had answered fire with fire. But the echo of that firestorm had only just begun. Before we dive into Iran's retaliation, take a second to reinforce your position. Like, subscribe, and stay locked in. In a battlefield this volatile, you won't want to miss the next move. Barely 12 hours after the Shahed Karimi base was reduced to smoldering ruins, Tehran vowed revenge. At 4 p.m. on July 5, 2025, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps launched a sudden salvo of 5 Fateh-11 0 medium-range ballistic missiles. Each carried a 1,500-pound warhead, each capable of reaching its target in under 6 minutes. Their destination was unmistakable: Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the nerve center of American air power in the Gulf. Sirens wailed as U.S. defenses roared to life. Patriot PAC-3 batteries locked onto the incoming warheads, while CRAM Phalanx guns spun at blistering speed, firing over 4,000 rounds per minute of tungsten shells into the night sky. Two Fateh missiles were destroyed mid-air, erupting into fireballs above the desert. A third was intercepted at 14,000 feet by an SM-6 missile launched from the nearby USS Karni, standing guard on high alert. But two slipped through. One slammed into an empty stretch of runway, tearing open 400 feet of fencing and gouging a crater deep into the asphalt. The second struck a fuel depot. The explosion was immediate, sending a column of fire into the sky and injuring 7 American contractors. 2 F-15 maintenance hangars were shut down temporarily as fire crews fought to contain the blaze. The message was clear: Iran would not remain silent. Damage control teams fought for hours to contain the blaze, which reached 1,800 degrees and threatened to ignite a nearby ammunition storage facility. By the time the flames were brought under control, the shockwaves of Iran's retaliation were already reverberating across the region. Allies moved quickly. Israel raised its alert level to DEFCON 2, activating Iron Dome batteries around Tel Aviv and repositioning F-35 Iranian fighters to forward bases. Saudi Arabia opened its airspace to U.S. aircraft, granting unrestricted transit corridors for strike packages. In the Gulf, 2 British Type 45 destroyers shifted from escort duty to full combat readiness, their Sea Viper missile systems primed to extend the coalition's air defense umbrella. The global economy shuddered. Crude oil prices surged past $110 per barrel, the highest since 2022. Tankers rerouted away from the Strait of Hormuz, markets convulsed, and energy ministries from Tokyo to Berlin braced for supply shocks. At the United Nations, the Security Council convened an emergency session. Russia and China condemned the U.S. strike on Shahed Karimi as destabilizing. Washington countered that its response was purely defensive, an answer to an act of war. Inside CENTCOM's war room, however, the mood was anything but diplomatic. Intelligence intercepts confirmed that Iranian missile brigades in Bushehr and Bandar Abbas were mobilizing, fueling fears of a second, larger wave of ballistic strikes. As the sun set over the Gulf, one senior U.S. commander voiced the sentiment hanging in the air: if they fire again, we'll take the fight to their doorstep. As smoke still lingered over Udeid and global oil markets convulsed, Washington issued a stark post-strike report. Shahed Karimi Air Base had lost 100% of its launch capacity. Infrared satellites confirmed no UAV activity, no radar emissions, no thermal signatures. The once prized hub of Iran's drone program was a cratered wasteland, but Tehran scrambled. NSA intercepts revealed IRGC units racing to relocate remaining UAV production assets to a fortified underground complex near Tehran. Engineers worked in frantic shifts, supply routes diverted under secrecy, while whispers of internal punishment for failed commanders spread through Iranian channels. For CENTCOM, the strike was not the end, but the beginning of a broader posture. As part of Operation Fortified Gulf, the U.S. initiated the largest regional military reconfiguration since 2003, reshaping the balance of power across the Gulf with unmistakable intent. A second aircraft carrier, the USS Theodore Roosevelt, entered the Gulf of Oman, flanked by a carrier strike group of 8 warships, including 2 Aegis destroyers and 3 logistics support vessels. Overhead, B-1B Lancers rotated in 6-hour deterrence patrols out of Diego Garcia, their payloads a blunt reminder of long-range strike capability. On land, THAAD batteries were deployed to both the UAE and Bahrain, stitching together a dense, layered missile shield. It was the largest surge of American combat power to the region in over 2 decades. The cost was immense. The Department of Defense allocated an emergency $3.2 billion solely to harden energy infrastructure and sustain rapid deployments. At the cyber level, U.S. Cyber Command activated its new quantum shield protocols as hostile Iranian-linked attacks against CENTCOM networks had spiked by 300% in just 48 hours. But Washington's message was unequivocal. America's logistics are not a soft target. Every carrier moved, every bomber airborne, every missile battery deployed reinforced that doctrine. Back home, images of burning fuel depots and returning fighter squadrons ignited a wave of patriotism. Polls showed a 19-point jump in support for military action among Americans over 55. Flags flew higher. Eyes stayed fixed on the skies. This wasn't the end, it was just the warning. The Gulf may have quieted for now, but silence does not mean stability. In just 4 days, the world witnessed Iran's stealthy UAV strike, America's surgical retaliation, and ballistic missiles in the sky. Iran's drone network lies crippled but not erased. U.S. infrastructure reinforced, yet never invulnerable. This was no skirmish of symbols. It was a war of capabilities, resolve, and message. This confrontation reshaped more than military postures. It redrew the strategic lines of the Gulf, exposing the limits of deterrence and the rapid evolution of drone warfare. For decades, asymmetric threats had been studied in war colleges and think tanks, but in July 2025, they became reality. Lethal, coordinated, undeniable. Shahed Karimi's destruction underscored both vulnerability and resolve. Iran's drone program, years in the making, was dismantled in minutes. Yet America's response carried a cost. Billions spent, forces surged, escalation risk heightened. The lesson was clear. Underestimating asymmetric threats invites disaster. But through the smoke and chaos, one principle held firm. When American logistics, the fuel lines, the arteries of power projection, are attacked, response is not optional, it is inevitable. And in that response, the world is reminded of a doctrine forged not in words, but in steel, strategy, and sacrifice. If this story gave you insight into the hidden mechanics of modern warfare and the stakes America faces abroad, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this video. Each action strengthens our ability to bring you the clearest, most uncompromising analysis of conflicts shaping our world. Your support is not just encouragement, it is fuel for vigilance, clarity, and truth in an era clouded by misinformation. Stand with us, stay informed, and never look away. Your support helps us bring clarity, truth, and vigilance to a world that needs all three.